Good morning, children. I told you before that Grand Central Station seemed to him like a tree. He wondered that Grand Central Station was expanding at a very fast rate, just like a tree, and with its roots. And it was not a big deal for him because it may be it may be that there is a secret tunnel under the city to the Times Square or maybe the Central Park. He feels it might be because Grand Central is a place of exit for innumerable people. Many people have used it for an exit. He also managed to escape reality because of the same reason. Although he never shared it with his psychiatrist, he never told that Grand Central Station looked him like a tree. The corridor that he entered into began angling left and slanting downward, which he felt odd. But about this, he was not sure where he was going. He kept on walking. There was no one except him, and the voice of his feet echoed. It means he was all alone in that corridor. He finally heard the sound of people talking from a distance, and then he took a left and walked down the stairs again, only to reach the third level of the Grand Central. For a moment, it seemed that he was back on the second level because everything was so familiar to him, but with a difference. He noticed that the room was smaller, there were fewer ticket windows and train gates. And the information booth in the center was wood and old looking. The man in the booth was wearing a green eye shade and a long black sleeve protectors. This was old fashioned. People used to wear dresses like this. The lights were dim because there was not electricity at that time. He was in the past, and it was the light of open flame gas lights. Many things compelled him to think that he was not in his time but in the past. And he was in a different time. This was the time travel that he was talking about, and nobody believed him. The things there were different. There were brass spittoons on the floor, and across the station a glint of light caught his eyes. A man was pulling a gold watch from his vest pocket. It was the light from the gold watch. He snapped open the cover and glanced at his watch and frowned. He was in some hurry, and he was somewhat worried, or he was somewhat showing the sign of anger. He wore a derby hat, a black four-button suit with tiny lapel, and he had a big black handlebar mustache. Then he looked around and saw that everyone in the station was dressed like 1890 something. Everyone was wearing old-fashioned clothes. They were dressed up in different way. He never saw so many beards, sideburns, and fancy mustache in my life. In his life. Because there was a craze for beards, sideburns, and fancy mustache in the past. And in his time, there was not such a craziness for the prayers. And after that, he saw a woman walking through the train gate. She was wearing a dress with leg of mutton sleeves. It means tight sleeves and skirts to the top of her high buttoned shoes. Back of her, out on the tracks, he saw the small Korean locomotive, which was made by Korean and Eves, but now it was not at all in use. Then he was sure that he was not in his time but in the past. To make sure, he walked over to the newsboy to validate his suspicion. He went over to the newspaper boy who was selling the world a newspaper which was discontinued years ago. There were some headlines about the then President Cleveland. I have found that front page since after that when he was back to his time, he confirmed it from the public library files. It was printed June 11, 1894. Now you can be sure that he had gone to the time of 1894, June 11, 1894. He turned towards the ticket window, knowing that here on the third level at Grand Central he could buy tickets, and he wanted to visit Galesburg with his wife Louisa. And in 1894, that was the time. That was the time when there were no wars. It was a time before the World War First and Second. So there was a peaceful environment at the time. He had been to Galesburg. Actually, his childhood was spent there. He spent his childhood there, and it was a wonderful town with big old frame houses, huge lawns, tremendous trees whose branches meet overhead and roof the streets. They were like the canopy on the street. And in 1894, summer evenings were twice as long, and people sat out on their lawns. People were not so busy at that time. They enjoyed their life. The summer evenings were long. The women used to sit there waving palm leaf fans with the fireflies all around in a peaceful world. To be back there with the First World War is still 20 years off, and World War II over 40 years in the future, it was really exciting for him.